So I don't know if you've noticed, but gas has been pretty cheap recently, and it's actually due to the collapse of the world's largest cartel. Let's talk about how that happened. So, in order to understand the situation, we're going to have to understand how the global oil market works. So, there are two main players we're going to talk about. One is OPEC, or OPEC Plus, which is the aforementioned cartel we were talking about. They're the world's largest cartel, and they control oil prices. They are an organization made up of many countries, including Saudi Arabia, Russia, and a bunch of others. But Russia and Saudi Arabia are the two countries of note that we're going to discuss. They together control about half of the global market for oil. Now, their main competitor is the United States, who control 20% of the global oil market. So the way this market works is OPEC comes together to collude to set the price of oil. And the way they do this is by influencing supply. So as supply goes up, prices go down. And as supply goes down, prices go up. And so they effectively decide how much oil to produce amongst themselves, which allows them to set the price. So in response to this, the USA either increases or decreases oil production, because the US needs a specific price to produce at. If the price is below about $70 per barrel, the United States cannot produce profitably enough to increase oil supply on their own. If the price gets above $70, then the United States can produce oil at a profitable enough rate that they increase production. And so it's this game of cat and mouse where OPEC tries to keep prices high, but not high enough that the US starts pumping out oil. So that's how the market works. Now, let's set the stage for how this system began to collapse. Saudi Arabia in 2016 realized that oil is not a renewable energy source, and 50% of their GDP at the time came from oil. And so they realized that in order to remain profitable and dominant, they were going to need to diversify away from oil. And as such, they launched a project called Vision 2030, which was a project to invest in a bunch of other industries to strengthen their economy and diversify away from oil. So they've since invested in things like tourism, real estate, renewable energy, EVs, etc. Any new tech, they've invested in it. And in order to fund all this investment, they need a high oil price. But again, not high enough that the US can pump out oil. And so, starting in around 2016, they started trying to keep the price at about 69.5-ish dollars per barrel. So, here's a little timeline with prices on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. This right here is the USA, we'll call it the USA money line, where if the price gets above this threshold, then the United States starts to increase production. And while it's below, production remains the same or decreases. Again, it's about $70 per barrel. So in 2016, Vision 2030 is launched, and the price of oil is right about here, floating between $30 and $50 per barrel. Over the next couple of years, the price is raised to right beneath that threshold, and it stays generally about here until 2020. Now, this isn't really relevant to the video. I might make a video about this later, but the price during COVID crashed so much because no one was driving that the oil price actually became negative for a little bit. So if you want me to make a video on that, let me know, because that's a whole another interesting topic. But it rebounded pretty quickly and got back up to around this threshold. Now, in 2022, something interesting happened, or tragic but interesting for this market, and that was the Ukraine war broke out. Now, Russia obviously was the country that went to war with Ukraine, and Russia is a OPEC Plus member, and they produce a lot of oil. Now, as countries started to place trade restrictions on Russia, that meant that a lot of the world's oil supply went off the market because no one's trading with Russia anymore. And as supply decreases, prices increase. So the price for oil exploded to between $90 and $120 per barrel. Now, in case you haven't noticed, we are well within the USA money threshold. And as such, the USA starts drilling. And they drill a lot. They drill so much that for a brief period, they became the world's leading producer of oil. Now, at the same time, Russia realizes we've got a war to fund. We can't afford to not sell oil to keep production low, because a lot of our economy is based on oil as well. And so Russia breaks ranks from OPEC and starts dumping oil onto the market. Now that you've got the U.S. rapidly increasing production and Russia rapidly dumping oil onto the market, the price tanks over the next couple of months, down to about here. Now, you might be saying, well, this is beneath the USA threshold, so the United States is going to stop producing oil as much, right? Wrong, because during this period, the United States oil corporations made so much money that they were actually able to lower the effective price they needed to produce oil down to about here at between $45 and $50 per barrel. And this is obviously really disastrous for Saudi Arabia because they need this price to stay high. So, in 2023, Saudi Arabia tries to get OPEC to collude again. They try to say, hey, we need this price to stay high, so please stop producing so much oil. But now that the price is so low, because it keeps falling, OPEC countries start to break ranks because they can no longer afford to keep oil production low. They're losing out on profit. And so OPEC kind of collapses right here, and the price falls precipitously down to about here, and is now, in 2025, currently hovering between $40 and $60 per barrel. And that is why oil is so cheap right now. Have a good day.